The vast reaches of space had belonged to the Kyril Empire for over 3,000 years. Their ships, sleek and predatory with their distinctive crimson hulls, had spread across the local arm of the galaxy like a slowly advancing plague. Lesser species weren't partners or even subjects. They were resources to be harvested, labor to be exploited, and occasionally amusement for the bored Kyril elite. High Commander Sun Li stood on the command deck of the Imperial scout vessel Dominator, his scaled fingers tapping impatiently against the polished black control panel. The holographic display showed yet another unremarkable star system, a yellow dwarf with 8 planets. Nothing special, nothing worth the Empire's attention. He was about to order his crew to move on when Sensor Officer Gil Yoon's voice cut through his thoughts. "Commander, the 3rd planet shows unusual readings. Heavy metal usage, atmospheric changes consistent with industrialization, and radio signals." Sun's golden eyes narrowed. "Sentience? How advanced?" "Pre-spacefaring, but developing quickly. They've established a small research base on their 6th planet's moon." The commander's mouth curved into what passed for a smile among his species, a bearing of needle-sharp teeth that would have terrified any human observer. "Perfect. Mark this system for resource extraction. We'll begin with that outpost, good practice for the cadets." 3 days later, the Europa Research Station became humanity's introduction to the wider galaxy. The Kyril didn't bother with communication or warnings. Their attack craft simply appeared above the ice-covered moon, weapons blazing. 37 researchers died in minutes, their final desperate transmissions reaching Earth with horrifying clarity. In the United Nations Emergency Chamber, Secretary General Jin Pak watched the footage with a grim expression. The alien ship fired precision beams that cut through the station's reinforced walls like paper. The last images showed strange bipedal creatures with scaled skin and elongated heads, methodically collecting samples from human corpses. "They're cataloging us," whispered Defense Minister Yoona Song. "Like specimens." Jin nodded slowly. "And they've dramatically underestimated us." She pressed a button on the console before her. "Implement the Lazarus Protocol. Authorization Pac Alpha 73. Half a world away, in a hidden command bunker beneath Mount Pektu, Admiral Day Park received the authorization code he had hoped would never come. For 30 years he had overseen humanity's greatest secret, a military space program hidden from the public eye, designed for the moment Earth confirmed it wasn't alone. And that moment had arrived in the worst possible way. "Status of the Dreadnought fleet?" he asked his executive officer. Colonel Han Lee brought up the displays showing 5 massive warships, each over 2 kilometers long, nestled in artificial caverns beneath the lunar surface. "All vessels at full readiness, sir. Crews have been in rotation training for years. We can deploy within 12 hours. Day walked to the massive view screen showing the returning Kyril scout ship. Their scans revealed it was transmitting data back to its home territory, no doubt reporting Earth as an easy target for future conquest. "They think we're defenseless," Day said softly. "They killed our people and left without even considering we might fight back." On the tactical display, the alien vessel accelerated away from the solar system, its engines flaring bright against the darkness. The Kyril were returning home, confident in their assessment of humanity as just another primitive species awaiting harvesting. "Let them go," Day ordered. "Let them report that Earth is weak." The next 8 hours unfolded with practiced precision. Around the world, selected military personnel received coded messages and reported to secret facilities. Families were told their loved ones were participating in emergency drills. The public remained unaware that humanity was about to strike, back against an enemy they didn't yet know existed. Beneath the lunar surface, enormous doors slowly slid open as the Dreadnoughts awakened. Unlike the graceful organic curves of Kyril vessels, Earth's warships were angular and brutal. Massive hunks of advanced alloys and composite materials designed for one purpose, to deliver overwhelming force. The flagship, Thermopylae, rose, first from its decades-long hiding place. Its hull gleamed dully in the starlight, covered with advanced stealth materials that absorbed sensor scans. Following it came the Normandy, Alamo, Marathon, and Midway, names chosen from humanity's Long history of defiant stands against superior forces. On the Thermopylae's bridge, Captain Sue Kim took her command chair. Around her, crew members worked with quiet efficiency, their faces showing the weight of their responsibility. They were Earth's vanguard, the first humans to deliberately leave the solar system, and they were doing so to pursue an enemy with technology centuries beyond their own. Navigation, Sue called. Plot intercept course with the Chiral vessel. We'll follow it home. Lieutenant J. Choi looked up from his station. Captain, the alien ship is using a form of faster-than-light travel our sensors can barely track. Sue smiled. Then it's time to reveal our first surprise. Activate the quantum displacement drive. The massive engines at the rear of each dreadnought began to hum, creating a field that bent space-time around the vessels. Unlike conventional propulsion, the QDD didn't move the ships through space. It moved space around the ships, allowing them to travel at speeds the Chiral would believe impossible for primitives like humans. As the 5 dreadnoughts accelerated into the void, Admiral Day Park watched from Lunar Command. He'd spent his life preparing for this moment, assembling not just ships and weapons, but the right people, those who could face the unknown without flinching. The Chiral thought they were safe, he whispered. They thought they could kill humans with impunity and simply return home. They're about to learn how wrong they were. The dreadnoughts vanished from normal space, their quantum fields carrying them in pursuit of humanity's new enemy. The Lazarus Protocol was fully activated. Earth's vengeance was on its way. The quantum displacement drives hummed with a sound like distant ocean waves as Earth's 5 dreadnoughts cut through the fabric of space. Captain Tae Kim stood on the bridge of the Thermopylae, watching the stars, streak by in patterns that human eyes were never meant to see. The massive view screen showed reality as a smear of colors and light, the strange visual effect of traveling through folded space-time. Returning to normal space in 30 seconds, announced Navigator J. Choi, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls. We'll emerge at the edge of the Vega corridor, just beyond Chiral sensor range. Tae nodded, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. 6 weeks had passed since they'd left Earth behind, pursuing the Chiral scout ship across a gulf of stars. The alien vessel had never detected them, arrogantly assuming no one could follow their advanced drives. All hands prepare for reversion, Tae ordered into the ship-wide comm. Around her, the bridge crew secured loose items and checked their restraints. The universe snapped back into focus as the 5 dreadnoughts emerged from quantum displacement. Ahead lay a vast starfield, and at its center, a bright cluster of stars that intelligence had identified as Chiral territory. Status of the fleet? Tae asked. Communications Officer Sung Park responded immediately. All ships reporting nominal, Captain. Normandy, Alamo, Marathon, and Midway are in formation and awaiting orders. Maintain stealth protocols. No active scans, passive sensors only. Tae turned to Science Officer Hannah Lee. What can you tell me about this region? Hannah adjusted her glasses, studying the data flowing across her screens. We're picking up debris fields, Captain. Lots of them. Some appear to be artificial in origin. Ship fragments, station components, and there's something else. Her voice faltered slightly. We're detecting radiation patterns consistent with planetary bombardment on the 3rd planet of this system. Tae walked to her station, looking over her shoulder at the readings. How long ago? Based on decay rates, approximately 70 Earth years. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what they were seeing. The remnants of a civilization that had dared to resist the Chiral Empire. Earth might have faced the same fate if the aliens had realized humans were more advanced than they appeared. Record everything, Tae ordered. This is why we're here. Over the next 3 days, the human fleet moved deeper into Chiral space, passing the silent monuments to imperial cruelty. They observed a gas giant whose moons had once housed mining colonies, now reduced to rubble. They recorded transmissions from a planet whose native species had been reduced to serving as manual labor, their once proud culture reduced to survival under Chiral overseers. In the fleet's engineering sections, teams led by Chief Engineer Jun Kang worked tirelessly to incorporate the technologies they observed. The Lazarus Protocol had always included adapting alien tech, a strategy born from centuries of science fiction that warned of the dangers of technological inferiority. Their shield harmonics operate on frequencies we never considered, Jun explained during a briefing in the Thermopylae's war room. He was surrounded by holograms showing Chiral defense systems. But we've developed countermeasures based on their own technology. Sometimes being the newcomer has advantages. We're not locked into their thinking patterns. On the 10th day, they reached their first major objective, a massive Chiral shipyard orbiting a blue dwarf star. The human fleet held position in the shadow of a distant moon, watching as dozens of Crimson warships moved in and out of the facility. Security Chief Bai Yi studied the enemy vessels with narrowed eyes. Their weapons systems are powerful but predictable. No redundancies. They're so confident in their superiority that they've built single points of failure into their designs. Overconfidence we can exploit, Tay noted. She turned to the tactical display, where a holographic representation of the Chiral homeworld floated, their ultimate destination. How long until we reach the capital? 4 more days at stealth speed, Jay replied. Meanwhile, in the Grand Hall of the Imperial Palace, on Chiral Prime, High Emperor Vorex was hosting a celebration. The discovery of yet another primitive world had put him in a generous mood. Fountains of glowing blue liquid flowed for the enjoyment of the gathered nobles, while enslaved aliens from a dozen species served exotic delicacies. To Earth, Vorex proclaimed, raising his crystalline goblet. May its resources prove abundant and its species properly grateful for the honor of serving the Empire. His generals laughed, their scaled faces contorting in expressions of cruel amusement. Holograms displayed the images sent back by the scout ship, Earth's cities, its oceans, its people going about their lives, completely unaware they were being observed and assessed. The harvest ships are already being prepared, announced General Trask, commander of the Imperial fleet. We anticipate minimal resistance. Their technology is primitive. Internal combustion engines, basic rocketry. They haven't even unified their planet under a single government. What none of them realized was that their own communications were being intercepted. The Thermopylae had deployed microsatellites at key points throughout the system, allowing them to eavesdrop on Chiral transmissions. Tay and her officers watched the Imperial celebration with cold fury. The aliens spoke of Earth as farmers might discuss a field to be harvested, calculating yields, planning transportation, estimating how many humans would be needed for labor and how many could be processed for other uses. They're planning to hit us in 3 of their months, Sung reported, translating the intercepted communications. That's approximately 4 Earth months. Tai's expression hardened as she watched the Chiral Emperor laugh about the primitive apes of Earth. They won't get the chance, she turned to her officers. We've seen enough. It's time to send a message back to Admiral Park. The Chiral Empire is exactly what we feared, and exactly what we prepared for. That night, as the human ships maintained their silent vigil, Engineering Officer Min Quan made a breakthrough. He had been studying the massive orbital defense platforms surrounding the shipyard and discovered a critical vulnerability in their sensor arrays. They're designed to detect engine emissions and metal masses, he explained to Tay during a midnight briefing. But our quantum displacement drives don't emit traditional signatures. If we time our approach correctly, we can move right past their outer defenses. Tay studied the schematics, a plan forming in her mind. So we could hit them where they're most vulnerable, then disappear before they know what happened. Min nodded eagerly. Exactly, Captain. We can be ghosts. In her quarters later, Tay recorded her personal log, speaking softly into the ship's secure system. We're about to strike the first blow in a war the Chiral don't even know has begun. They thought they were safe in their empire, protected by their advanced technology and millennia of unchallenged domination. She paused, looking at a photo of her family back on Earth. They were wrong. Dawn never came to the shipyards of Mektar Prime. The massive orbital installation rotated slowly in the light of 3 distant suns, its docking bays filled with Crimson warships in various stages of construction and repair. Workers of a dozen enslaved species toiled under the watchful eyes of Chiral overseers, their labor building the very fleet that would someday subjugate their homeworlds. No one noticed when 5 shadows detached themselves from the dark side of Mektar's largest moon. No alarms sounded as the human dreadnoughts approached. their quantum displacement drives operating at minimal power, just enough to move them silently into position. On the bridge of the Thermopylae, Captain Tae Kim checked her chronometer. 1. Final time. All ships, this is actual, she said, her voice carrying to the other 4 vessels. Execute Operation Thunderbolt on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Simultaneously, 5 weapon systems that had never been fired in actual combat activated. The human engineers had named them fractal cannons, devices that fired streams of particles that split and multiplied along mathematically precise patterns, bypassing shields calibrated for conventional weapons. The first target was Mektar's Central Defense Hub. The Alamo and Midway focused their fire on the massive structure, their fractal beams cutting through its supposedly impenetrable shields like they weren't even there. Within seconds, the hub exploded in a dazzling burst of blue-white energy, temporarily blinding the station's sensors. Defense hub neutralized, reported Tactical Officer Nari Cho, her eyes fixed on her displays. Moving to secondary targets, now it was the Normandy and Marathon's turn. They targeted the shipyard's power cores, using precise bursts that severed energy conduits without causing catastrophic meltdowns that would kill everyone aboard. The human fleet had strict orders: target military assets and capabilities, minimize civilian casualties. As emergency lights flashed across the Chiral installation, the first frantic defense craft began to launch. Small and nimble, they swarmed toward the human vessels like angry insects. Defense craft approaching, estimated 60 units, Nari announced. Tai nodded calmly. Deploy countermeasures. From concealed bays along the hulls of the Earth Dreadnoughts, thousands of small drones emerged, each no larger than a coffee mug, but equipped with advanced targeting systems and miniature versions of the fractal technology. They moved in swirling, unpredictable patterns that human tacticians had modeled on starling murmurations. The Chiral pilots, trained to fight in rigid formations against conventional enemies, found themselves completely overwhelmed. Their shots passed harmlessly through gaps in the drone swarms, while the human devices darted in to deliver precise, disabling strikes. Aboard the Chiral command vessel Inevitable Victory, Fleet Admiral Ji Kang watched in growing horror as his display screens showed one red indicator after another. Defense systems failing. Communication arrays destroyed. Power grids shutting down. "What are they?" he demanded, his scaled fist slamming against the arm of his command chair. "How did they penetrate our outer defenses?" His sensor officer, a thin, nervous Chiral named Vex, frantically worked his controls. "Unknown vessels, Admiral. They don't match any known configuration in the Imperial database, but they appear to be using technologies similar to our own, yet implemented in ways we never considered." On the main view screen, one of the massive human dreadnoughts turned ponderously toward the Inevitable Victory. Its angular hull was pocked with weapon ports that now glowed with building energy. "Evasive maneuvers!" G shouted, but it was too late. The Thermopylae fired, not with its fractal cannons, but with a gravity lensing weapon that bent space itself around the Chiral flagship. The massive warship suddenly found itself pulled sideways with irresistible force, colliding with 2 of its own escort vessels. Shields flared and failed as the ships ground against each other. Throughout the Mektar system, Chiral commanders tried to coordinate a response, but found their communication systems jammed by technologies they couldn't counter. The humans had studied their enemy well, learning their protocols and frequencies through weeks of silent observation. "This is impossible," muttered Commander Drax of the Imperial Third Fleet as he watched the battle unfold. "They're primitives. They barely have spaceflight. How are they doing this?" What he couldn't know was that humanity had spent decades preparing for this moment. Earth's leaders had always suspected they weren't alone in the galaxy, and they had built their secret fleet with one purpose: to ensure that humanity's first interstellar war wouldn't be its last. 3 hours into the battle, the Chiral resistance was crumbling. The Inevitable Victory drifted powerless, its engines and weapons disabled by precision strikes. Admiral G had ordered his crew to abandon ship, but remained behind himself, standing rigidly on his bridge as human boarding parties approached. The airlock cycled open, and G found himself facing a squad of armored human soldiers. At their head walked a small female, Captain Tay herself, her helmet removed to reveal her face to the enemy. "Admiral Ji Kang," she said, using the Kyril language that the fleet's linguists had decoded during their approach. "Your shipyard is under our control. Your fleet is destroyed or disabled. Surrender now, and lives will be spared." Ji hissed in contempt. "You think you've won something here? This is one outpost of thousands. When the Emperor learns of this attack, he will send the Grand Armada. They will burn your world to ash." Tay smiled slightly. "That's exactly what we're counting on, Admiral." She turned to Security Chief Bei Yi, who held up a small device. "The station's database has been copied, Captain. We have everything. Fleet movements, defense codes, Imperial communication protocols. In the hours that followed, the human forces secured their victory. The shipyard's enslaved workers were freed, many of them seeing their Kyril masters humbled. For the first time in their lives, the human medics treated injured civilians of all species, while engineers worked to restore life support and critical systems damaged in the fighting. By the end of the standard day, Captain Tay stood in what had been Admiral G's command center, now repurposed as the human fleet's forward headquarters. The displays showed human ships in defensive positions around the shipyard, while repair teams worked to salvage useful Kyril technology. "Casualty report," she requested. Lieutenant Sung Park consulted his tablet. 27 human casualties. "Captain, 8 fatalities. The Midway took the heaviest damage, but Chief Engineer Jun reports it will be combat-ready within 48 hours. Tay nodded silently, feeling the weight of those 8 lost lives. But compared to what might have been, compared to what would have happened to Earth if the Kyril had struck first, it was a price they had willingly paid. "Send a quantum burst transmission to Earth," she ordered. "Tell Admiral Park that Phase 1 is complete. Mektar Prime is under human control." As her orders were carried out, Tay looked at the tactical display showing their position relative to Kyril Prime. The war had begun, and the Empire had received its first shocking lesson about the primitive humans they had so grievously underestimated. Emperor Vorex's talons dug into the armrests of his throne as he watched the holographic replay of the Mektar disaster for the 3rd time. His inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. Around him, the Imperial Council shifted uncomfortably, none willing to be the first to speak after such catastrophic news. "Impossible," he finally hissed, his voice carrying in the vast silent chamber. "These humans were primitives. We observed their world. They use fossil fuels. Their space vessels are crude chemical rockets." High General Zax, commander of the Imperial forces, stepped forward. His ceremonial armor clicked with each movement, scales of precious metal that had never seen actual combat. "My Emperor, it appears we were deceived. The humans deliberately projected an image of technological backwardness while developing capabilities in secret. And now they hold Mektar." Vorex's voice was dangerously soft. "They control our 2nd largest shipyard. They have captured an Imperial admiral." "The situation can be remedied, Majesty," Zax assured him. "I have already ordered the Grand Armada to assemble, 10,000 warships from every corner of the Empire. We will crush these upstarts and make an example of their world." Vorex's eyes narrowed to slits. "See that you do, General. I want their planet reduced to molten slag." What neither the Emperor nor his general knew was that their conversation was being recorded. In the shadows of the vast palace network, hidden infiltration programs planted by human stealth ships had taken root. These digital parasites were the creation of Earth's most brilliant information warfare specialists, designed to penetrate Kyril systems and gather intelligence. While the Dreadnoughts had provided the distraction at Mektar, smaller vessels had deployed these information weapons throughout the Empire. Now they were about to bear fruit. 3 days later, as the Grand Armada began to assemble at the Imperial hub of Corvus Station, something unprecedented happened. On thousands of communication channels across the Empire, the usual propaganda broadcasts were suddenly replaced by something different. Raw footage from the Imperial archives themselves. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds watched as carefully selected clips showed the true face of the Kyril Empire. the casual extermination of species who resisted, medical experiments conducted on sentient beings, the deliberate starvation of populations to force compliance, and, most damning of all, recordings of Imperial Council meetings where the conquest of Earth was discussed not as a matter of security, but as an economic opportunity, another resource to be exploited, another people to be enslaved or exterminated. On the agricultural world of Deltin Prime, the furred natives watched these broadcasts in stunned silence. For 3 centuries they had been told they were valued members of the Empire, their grain feeding the Imperial core. Now they saw the truth, that they were considered expendable, that plans existed to replace them with automated systems once their usefulness ended. By nightfall, the Imperial Governor's palace was in flames. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. Species that had been traditional enemies found common cause against their oppressors. Imperial garrisons, always small due to the Kiral's confidence in their technological supremacy, found themselves overwhelmed by populations that suddenly had nothing to lose. Aboard the human stealth vessel Nightshade, Captain Wu Li watched the reports flow in with grim satisfaction. His ship had been one of 6 deployed specifically for this information campaign, carrying technology designed to hack Kiral networks and distribute the truth. "Message from the Thermopylae, Captain," his communications officer reported. "Captain, Tay says the operation is proceeding faster than expected. Rebellions have broken out in 73 systems." Wu nodded. "Good. The more chaos behind them, the fewer ships the Grand Armada will be able to muster. But the Kiral Empire hadn't ruled for millennia by being easily defeated. High General Zax responded to the rebellions with brutal efficiency, diverting enough ships to put down the most threatening uprisings while continuing to assemble his main force. "We will deal with the rebel worlds after we crush the human threat," he declared in an empire-wide broadcast. "The humans have shown themselves to be manipulators and deceivers, spreading lies about our glorious empire. Their world will pay the price." Unaware that Earth was far from defenseless, the Grand Armada departed for the Sol system 6 weeks after the fall of Mektar. Even with the rebellions tying down many ships, it was still an awesome force. Over 7,000 warships of various classes, carrying millions of Kiral soldiers and enough firepower to reduce a planet to rubble. What they couldn't know was that Earth had been preparing for this moment from the day the Europa Research Station was destroyed. Admiral Day Park had implemented the second phase of the Lazarus Protocol, transforming the entire solar system into an interlocking defensive network. The massive gas giant Jupiter now bristled with automated weapon platforms disguised as small moons, each containing gravity lensing technology that could tear a battleship apart. The asteroid belt had been seeded with thousands of stealth mines, programmed to ignore human ships but attach themselves to Kiral vessels. Even seemingly empty space concealed surprises. Clouds of nanobots that could disable electronic systems, fields of microscopic particles that would shred shields operating on Kiral frequencies. And most importantly, the 5 Dreadnoughts had returned home, taking up strategic positions throughout the system. Their crews were battle-hardened now, their systems upgraded with technology captured at Mektar. They waited in perfect ambush positions, hidden by the very quantum technology that had carried them to Kiral space. As the Grand Armada approached the outer reaches of the Sol system, Admiral Day Park stood in the heart of the command bunker beneath Mount Pektu. Around him, the best military minds of Earth monitored the approaching enemy. "They've taken the bait," he said quietly. "They think we've left our home undefended to strike at their territory." Colonel Han Li nodded. A logical assumption from their perspective. They've never faced an enemy who could threaten them on multiple fronts. Day studied the tactical display showing the Kiral fleet's approach vector. "They're coming in through the ecliptic plane, just as we predicted. They'll pass Jupiter in approximately 6 hours." "Perfect alignment for the Thermopylae's position," Han noted. "Captain Tay will have a clear shot at their flagship." Day allowed himself a small smile. "The Kiral have ruled through fear for thousands of years. They've forgotten what it's like to be afraid." He looked up at the massive screen, showing the approaching armada. It's time they remembered. The darkness beyond Jupiter's orbit erupted with light as the first wave of the Grand Armada triggered Earth's outer defense grid. Brilliant blue flashes marked the deaths of Chiral Vanguard ships, their hulls torn apart by forces they couldn't detect until it was too late. The carefully arranged minefield, disguised as natural space debris, claimed over 300 vessels in the opening minutes of the battle. High General Zax watched from the command deck of the Emperor's Wrath, his flagship and the pride of the Chiral fleet. Its hull stretched nearly 5 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with enough firepower to reduce continents to ash. Minor losses, he declared, mandibles clicking in irritation. Press forward. Their tricks cannot stop the might of the Empire. But as the Armada pushed deeper into the solar system, the tricks only became more devastating. The Chiral battle doctrine relied on overwhelming force, applied in rigid formations, tactics that had served them well against less advanced enemies for millennia. Against the asymmetrical warfare of the humans, these formations became death traps. Near the orbit of Mars, the dreadnought Normandy revealed itself, rising from the shadow of the red planet's moon Phobos. Its fractal cannons fired not at the Chiral ships themselves, but at precise points in empty space, creating gravitational lensing effects that twisted and warped reality. Hundreds of Chiral vessels suddenly found themselves pulled together, their shields grinding against each other and failing. "Impossible!" screamed Zax as he watched a full battle group destroyed by a single human vessel. "All ships, target that dreadnought." The Chiral responded with a massive barrage of energy weapons and missiles, enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. But the Normandy simply vanished, its quantum displacement drive shifting it out of normal space microseconds before impact. The Chiral weapons continued on their trajectory and struck their own forces on the far side of the formation. Similar scenes played out across the solar system. The Marathon appeared in the midst of the Chiral right flank, unleashed hell, and disappeared before retaliation could find it. The Alamo and Midway worked in coordination, creating overlapping fields of fire that caught Imperial ships in devastating crossfires. And throughout it all, the automated defenses that humanity had spent years preparing continued their relentless work. Nanomachine clouds infiltrated chiral life support systems. EMP weapons knocked out ship after ship without destroying them, a deliberate choice to minimize casualties. 6 hours into the battle, almost half the Grand Armada had been disabled or destroyed. The remainder pressed on toward Earth, driven by Zax's increasingly desperate orders and the Emperor's fury. "We will not be defeated by primitives," Emperor Vorex raged from his command throne aboard the Emperor's Wrath. "I will personally see their world burn." It was then that the Thermopylae made its move. Captain Tae Kim had held her ship in reserve, waiting for the perfect moment. Now, as the Chiral flagship drove toward Earth with its remaining escorts, she gave the order. "All power to forward shields, intercept course, weapons hot." The Thermopylae appeared directly in the path of the Emperor's Wrath, its angular hull gleaming in the light of Earth's sun. Though less than half the size of the Imperial flagship, it projected an aura of absolute confidence as it faced down. The approaching behemoth. "Open a channel," Tae ordered. On the Chiral flagship, Vorex and Zax found themselves staring at the human captain's face on their main view screen. "Emperor Vorex," Tae said calmly, "your fleet is defeated. Your empire is in rebellion. Surrender now, and this ends without further bloodshed." Vorex's scaled face contorted with rage. "We will never surrender to lesser beings. All weapons fire." The Emperor's Wrath unleashed its full arsenal against the Thermopylae. Planet-killing energy beams, antimatter torpedoes, exotic particle weapons, all converged on the human vessel, and all splashed harmlessly against its shields. "As you wish," Tae said quietly. "All batteries fire." The Thermopylae's weapons found the microscopic weaknesses in the Imperial flagship's defenses, gaps that human analysts had identified through careful study of captured Chiral technology. Precision strikes disabled its engines, weapons, and shields without destroying the massive vessel. As systems failed around him, Vorex ordered his personal escape craft prepared. "The battle may be lost, but I will return with an even greater force," he declared as he rushed toward the hangar bay. He never made it. The Thermopylae had deployed its own boarding parties, elite soldiers equipped with adaptive armor based on Kyril designs but improved by human innovation. They secured critical areas of the flagship, including the hangar bays and escape pod launches. When Admiral Day Park arrived on the Emperor's Wrath 6 hours later, he found the Kyril leader secured in his own throne room, surrounded by human guards and several high-ranking Imperial officers who had chosen to surrender rather than die for a losing cause. "Emperor Vorex," Day said, approaching the throne, "I am Admiral Park of Earth." "I have nothing to say to you, human," Vorex spat. "Kill me and be done with it." Day shook his head. "That's not why I'm here. I've come to offer terms." For the next hour, the human admiral outlined a vision that left the Emperor and his officers stunned. Not genocide, not even the dissolution of the Empire. Instead, a transformation, the creation of the Terran Protectorate Alliance, where former Imperial worlds would have self-determination and the Kyril themselves would retain their homeworld and core systems. "Your choice is simple," Day concluded. "Join us in building something better, or watch as your 1,000-year empire crumbles completely." 3 months later, on the icy surface of Europa where human blood had first been spilled, a remarkable ceremony took place. In a transparent dome, allowing a view of Jupiter's massive form, representatives from 50 formerly enslaved species gathered alongside human officials and even some Kyril who had accepted the new order. Admiral Tae Kim, newly promoted after the Battle of Seoul, unveiled a simple monument, a black obelisk bearing the names of the 37 researchers who had died in the Kyril's first attack. "We remember them not to fuel hatred," she said, her voice carrying to all assembled and being broadcast across 100 worlds, "but to remind ourselves of the price of unpreparedness and the value of peace." As the ceremony concluded, ships from dozens of species, former enemies now cautious allies, formed an honor guard in Europa's orbit. Among them was the Thermopylae, battle-scarred but proud, the ship that had faced down an emperor and helped reshape a galaxy. In the years that followed, humanity's reputation spread across the stars. They became known not just for their cunning in battle or their technological ingenuity, but for something the galaxy had rarely seen before: victory without vengeance, strength tempered by mercy. Many species still remembered with awe how the EC, humans, had descended from nowhere, their dreadnoughts bringing not extinction but liberation. How they had taken an empire of fear and helped transform it into something better. How they had proven that even the mightiest could fall, and even the fallen could rise again. The end.